you can't just create stuff. What do we want our audiences to think, feel, and do? And how are we going to measure that? It really is important that we're being mindful and purposeful in terms of what we create, how we create it, and then looking to see if it's ultimately driven the behavior that we wanted.
Today in the show, we have Dara Royer. Dara is a Senior Vice President of Marketing and the CMO at Syracuse University. Dara is an organizational strategist with over 15 years of executive experience reimagining marketing as a dynamic leader and the architect behind award-winning brand transformational efforts in healthcare, higher ed, and international relief sectors. Very excited about having you on the show today.
Thank you for inviting me.
So this one I am very, very excited about because I kind of live and breathe marketing, and I have so much I want to talk to you about. Just to kind of set the stage here, how would you define marketing? What is marketing to you?
So marketing is really about getting the right message to the right audience at the right time in the right way. So it's about being clear around what you're trying to achieve, and ultimately, marketing is in service at its best of advancing organizational or business goals. So we want to be really purposeful in how we share stories and how we get our message to the right audience to drive certain behaviors.
That was a pretty streamlined definition of marketing. I think that makes a lot of sense to me. I like that.
Thanks.
Great. So I want to kind of start from the beginning because I think marketing just means so many different things, and we can talk about campaigns. Just with marketing in general, if I'm a person or a business or an organization and I'm like, I have to get into marketing, I don't know where to start, where would you start?
Yeah, I think first, you start with the end in mind. So I just mentioned that marketing is in service of organizational goals. And so I think the starting point is, what am I trying to achieve and with whom? And that's going to be foundational for anything that you're pulling together in terms of a marketing campaign or plan or deliverables. And so being really clear on your goals and objectives, what you're going to measure, and then who you're trying to reach through your marketing plan. And the second piece of that, speaking of audience, is being as crystal clear as you can be around what you want your audience or audiences to think and feel and do. And again, ultimately, we're trying to shape mindset or to influence thinking or feelings so that people are ultimately taking the steps or the actions we want them to take. And that can look like a lot of different things. It can be certainly for a business buying a product, for a nonprofit organization, and my career has been built working for mission-driven organizations. It can be about coming to work for us. It can be volunteering. It can be giving to that organization. And so we're trying to capture share of mind, heart, and pocketbook. And so there's action associated with that. So we're trying to motivate action. And then the third first step, if you will, so you said, where do you start, is to really look around in the marketplace. And this is often a step that I think marketers miss, which is you have to be aware of what others are doing in the space. The average American sees 6,000 brand messages a day, 6,000. So how do you break through that? If you're just creating things, you're creating more noise. So you really want to be specific about what you're saying, and that requires a knowledge of what others in the industry are doing too, so that you can try to differentiate yourself.
Yep, absolutely. So I'll tell you about my journey as a filmmaker. I think the audience might respond well to this. So when I did videos for the longest, it was just videos because videos are cool. Like, yeah. I'm doing video because it's cool. Like, that was pretty much it. Like, watch this, it's cool, right? But then actually starting to do campaigns and working with agencies and businesses and figuring out how do you actually make the most value and impact. Now I do think of the why. Why do you want to do video? And it's always funny because a brand new client will be like, hey, James 325, really want to work with you. And then my first question is, well, why? Why
Yeah.
do you want to do video?
Yeah.
And it seems counterintuitive because are you like, do you not want me to work with you, right? But if you can actually get to, well, we're trying to sell more. Well, how many more? 10 more? 100 more? And the more I can define that up front, the more success I feel like I have with the actual video. Is that how you define it as well?
Absolutely. And I think you're doing a service to your partners, to your clients by asking that question, because sometimes it does get an organization, I imagine, to pause and say, wait a second, what at the end of the day are we really trying to do here? That I imagine also motivates you to shoot your content in certain ways,
Completely different.
edit your content, prepare things in ways that ultimately are in service of a broader business objective. So it's the right question.
Also thinking about the campaign is that target audience. So why do you want to make the video, and then who are you making the video for? And I do feel like that's the trap, and I'm pretty sure that you've probably seen this all across the board, is most people want to make something for everyone.
Yeah.
Well, we want to do brand, and we want to sell more,
Yeah.
and we want to do this from anyone
Yeah.
from the age of 2 to 72.
Yeah.
How do you actually narrow that down? Do you have a process, or how do you think about that?
Yeah, we do. So we do have a process we follow. We often start, particularly with big campaigns, with a creative brief, a kind of standard best practice, I would say. People handle creative briefs in different ways, but some of the key questions that we ask are obviously objective, like we've talked about, but audience. And we will have primary audiences, often secondary audiences, and then tertiary audiences as well.
Really? That's
and
interesting.
so it's not that you have to get to one. I'd say sometimes you do have different groups that you're targeting, but it's helpful to prioritize. And then within a campaign, you might have different pieces that are for different audiences. And so we say it's like a family of materials. And those materials can be multimedia. We're not just talking, obviously, about like a print material, but you're going to have a suite of things that you create. Some of them might be primarily for your primary audience. Some might be for a secondary audience. And so this is where that art and science of really solid marketing comes into play. It is hard sometimes to have one thing that's supposed to be for everybody. And so really mapping out what you're creating and who is it for, and understanding those audiences too deeply is really critical.
When you're thinking about deliverables, are you thinking about that in the pre-production element, like the brainstorming, or is that in the post-production process?
That's a good question. The order that we tend to go in terms of our process, and I know it's probably helpful if this information can be actionable to your viewers. So if I were to go step by step, I would say, we are working off this creative brief and off of marketing strategy, which is informed by the brief, where we've really said, again, who are we targeting? What are we trying to achieve? Understanding those audiences is going to start to motivate, what are we going to package? How are we going to package it? And then on the other side, what are going to be the channels that we use? So we do start to think about deliverables in pre-production. It's part back to that, start with the end in mind. So we don't want to go on set or go on campus, in the case of Syracuse University, let's say, and shooting without an understanding of what is the end? What are we trying to deliver? If it's going to be something, let's say, for social media, we're going to probably shoot it in a vertical format. That might sound strange to some people. Why? Well, that's how it needs to be consumed in the end. If we're shooting it for to live in a different kind of setting, we might shoot things differently. If we know that it's going to go on Instagram, it has to be a certain length. So all of these things are really important in pre-production while mapping things out. So you can't just go out without a good game plan, in my view, and get the stuff that you need.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can probably imagine, but all the time we'll do this great video. Originally, it's like a 3-minute video, and they'd be like, "Oh, can we get a 15-second vertical for social media?" We're like, I guess, like, we can make it work. And then we'll find that the 15-second social media was actually what they're after in the first place and what actually gets the most attention.
Yeah.
And I highly agree. The more you can think about that stuff up front, like, what are we actually doing with it? The more success and the more value you'll have for your audience, right?
Yeah.
And I think vertical is very interesting these days because it is so new.
Yeah.
And I'll ask them, okay, what are the deliverables? Is it going to be horizontal or is it going to be vertical? And vertical kind of usually is like an afterthought for most companies.
Yeah.
I think it's in bigger markets becoming, no, we're going to shoot vertical only. But I highly encourage thinking about where are you going to showcase this platform. Do you have success with vertical? This is kind of like a sidebar here, but I find that interesting data-wise.
Yeah, we do. And I think this is something that's really important about, when you're thinking through the how of creating great marketing campaigns. It's this might sound obvious. It's not easy because it takes different expertise. So when we're creating something, we often have team members from our digital team members from our video production team, multimedia team, might have a photographer there, our content team, our storytellers that are thinking about how to bring these stories to life, a strategist who really understands, again, business goals. So you have a lot of people coming to the table with different ideas about things. And back to your question about vertical video, I'd say this is where our digital team has been really important in terms of their voice saying, wait, let's think about what we're trying to accomplish here. The end distribution plan is this. This is what we're going to need to make it happen. And there's good, discussion, debate, conversation, collaboration, a lot of passion that can happen between team members who are trying to figure out the best way to get things done. And I'd also say this, as much as I'm all about the planning, you have to have flexibility. There are magical things that can happen sometimes, as I'm sure you know, when you're on a shoot, especially if you're capturing authentic moments. And so how do you give yourself opportunity to really be in that moment and to capture that and maybe shift and go in a different direction? Also, I think marketing today is about testing. And so you asked, have we had success? Part of the reason we know we've had success is we're looking at our metrics and our numbers, and we've seen exponential growth, like triple-digit growth, just phenomenal growth over followers, engagement across our social media channels. And I think part of that is real mindfulness about how we're telling our stories. And part of that is format.
Oh, there's a lot I want to touch upon here. I want to focus on pre-production. Just one last question about pre-production.
Yeah, sure.
I find that is, when I talk to filmmakers especially, pre-production is unfortunately the missing element. I think that can go from a mediocre video to a great video that actually provides value. With everything we talked about, the creative brief, getting everyone to the table, talking about ideas, pivoting in ideas before you actually start filming or taking photos or doing the copy.
Yeah.
How long does that pre-production process take?
So that's something I don't have an easy answer for. I think it depends on the project. It depends is the short answer. If it is, let's say, for a national campaign, and it's something that we are trying to do, we have a new concept that we're playing with, that we're trying to figure out, it might be a long time because you might be doing user testing, you might be doing focus group testing, there might be some things that you're exploring. You might start shooting and then realize that the direction you're going in isn't quite working. You might need to recalibrate. Or it might be for something that has a hard deadline and you have kind of limited time. So I wish I had an easy answer for you, like a quick soundbite for you. But I think I really do think it depends on ultimately what the project is.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, unfortunately, I think due dates and timelines have gotten shorter and shorter and shorter as the
Yeah.
years and quick media has
Yeah.
advanced. I would say if I had any advice to a filmmaker
Yeah.
is to slow down, is to
Yeah.
take more time in that pre-production, even if it's a day of pre-production. My favorite, I mean, I have fond memories of growing up watching behind the scenes of Lord of the Rings videos.
Yeah.
They came out with the extended version, had all the Lord of the Rings stuff. They storyboarded everything, then they also did a cinematic of everything, an animation, and then basically they already knew what the movie looked like
Yeah.
to the T before
Yeah.
they actually filmed it, because the money is spent there. And most of our work is interviews. So when we're doing interviews, getting someone in that chair, one of our biggest jokes is scheduling is the hardest part of our jobs. And,
Yeah.
and that's super true.
Yeah.
Especially if I'm in the middle of scheduling like 20 important people, to get in a room at one time. So the more you can plan that out ahead of time and take advantage of that time. So to me, it's like if you're going to film for one day, if I had a nice, magical equation, I think it's almost like 4-1. Like if you can really put that much like pre-production in, I think the outcome would be that better.
So I'll validate you on that.
Okay.
I think that that's absolutely true because garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah.
So you don't have a plan. You don't know what you're trying to accomplish. You can set up an incredible shoot, and we know that's not inexpensive to do, depending on what you're pulling together. It's people time. It's all of those things, and so you don't want to lose. Ultimately time in the end too, because you just didn't have a good plan on the front end. So I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
So this kind of leads me to my next question. To get out of pre-production, I can talk about pre-production. I'm fascinated with pre-production now because it never was a thing. It was always like, oh, you want a video? Okay, I'll show up on Tuesday and I'll be there and we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
One of the main things I got known for was like, oh, James will figure it out in post-production. And I loved that at first, and now I hate it. When someone says that on set, that means, uh-oh, no one knows what's going on. Now I got to figure it out in post-production.
Yeah.
So,
I'll tell you, because we're just have launched this campaign. And one of the things that was really important for us, and we had to shift because we were doing a lot of, in the early days, I would say, trying to be smart, but still we had to make some guesses about some of the things that we would need to shoot. And what we were finding is it just, in the end, same thing, wasn't exactly what we needed. And so we started to really shoot to spec. And what I mean, what I mean by that, but for your audience, really having a very clear image, particularly with our photography for things like at a home, airport, billboards, let's say, or for print ads, or even for digital ads. Where are the words going to be? What is the size of this? What's going to be in frame? What's out of frame? And really almost creating that storyboard, if you will, going on set or on site and shooting exactly to those specifications. It did take time. So I'm going to validate you again. It did take time on the upfront. Totally worth it. Better imagery, works well with all the things in the environment, really translates. And so it's super important.
I remember one of the first times I worked with Syracuse University, they gave me a brand guideline book, and it was printed out, and it was beautiful, and it was like this thick, and it had all the photos of what you can use, what you can't use. I actually never received that from anyone ever before.
Yeah.
So getting that just streamlined everything, because sometimes I'll be requested with, oh, just add some graphics to it. Well, what does that mean? What does it look like? How does it feel? What font? What, and so these easy, what can be perceived as easy things actually are very complex, especially when deadlines are just ticking closer to the end and we're fighting over a font or, spacing or what it says.
Well, and don't get me going on brands, because obviously this is a big passion of mine too. Those part of this breaking through all of the noise, not just the noise your organization or business might create, but all the other noise, really requires consistency and thoughtfulness and a brand strategy that leads to brand guidelines, that lead to consistent, compelling, cohesive ways of expressing your brand story. really is the key, I think, to breaking through and to having your story and your brand resonate with people. So,
Yep.
and I guess that relates to pre-production, all the pre-work that gets you to where you're going ultimately too, because you're right, you can make pretty stuff. You can make a compelling video, but ultimately, if it's not adding to the epic that you're trying to tell, it becomes just an episode. And we really want to build epic brands and epic stories, and that just requires a different, more thoughtful approach.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, kind of change directions here.
Yeah, sure.
Quality over quantity or quantity over quality?
I would go, well, again, it depends, but I would say it depends on, again, what you're trying to achieve and what kind of quality and quantity we're talking about. Now I sound like a reporter, but
I know you're a big advocate for impact, and usually impact is more quality over quantity. But I also feel like we're living in that social media. You need to post today. You need to post 20 times a day. Like, kind of garbage stuff. So I'm just kind of, what's your opinion on that?
I'm happy to speak to that. So impact is an important driver. And what I would say is, I guess, let me reframe this a little bit. In my mind, I think we're talking about output versus impact. And if we're talking about it in that way, what I would say is there is a huge focus, I would say, oftentimes on, we just need to create stuff. And the discipline of marketing has evolved incredibly, as we know, over the past 15, 20 years, as long as I've been working in this field. And particularly in the last couple of years, as consumer behavior has shifted, as media consumption has changed. And so you can't just create stuff. That's the output. Those are what I call random acts of marketing, and they're not going to drive your business or your organization forward. We really want to be focusing on, again, back to what do we want our audiences to think, feel, and do, and how are we going to measure that? And so at the end of the day, I think it is about impact. Sometimes you do need some volume, as you referenced, regular consistency in terms of posting, for example, that is going to be important. But if you're just throwing things out there, you can actually do more damage than good. Because if it's not building your epic, if it's not oriented in the right way, if it's not authentic, if it's not aligned with your brand, it's almost like you're taking 2 steps backwards rather than moving things forward. And so absolutely, I think impact over output, really mission critical in terms of marketing.
100% agree. I think because people get into the trap of I need to post, and or even like someone is telling that person they need to post, and so they're just posting anything. And bad content can be 100 times worse than a really good, impactful piece of content. Because if all of a sudden you have all this great content, and then you post something that's either not even just like inappropriate or just really off, just quality is off or it just looks different, people are going to be like, oh, they fell off like really quickly. And I think people should always focus on the highest quality and then maximize quantity after that.
No, I think that's true. And it goes back to, I think, the root of a lot of what we've been talking about, which is being purposeful. Purposeful in your storytelling, purposeful in everything that you do. And it is, I think, one of the risks with how people perceive marketing sometimes is that they equate marketing with a deliverable or just doing something, just a post. And now that we've done marketing, you have sometimes, I've seen organizations that are incentivized or held accountable for just the number of things they produce. They'll say, were you successful this year? Well, yes, we produced 1,000 things. 980 of those could be the wrong things. So it really is important that we're being mindful and purposeful in terms of what we create, how we create it, and then looking to see if it's ultimately driven the behavior that we wanted in the end.
Yeah, that's great. How do you know when the campaign is actually completed and ready for the general audience?
So we talk a lot about rolling rollouts, by the way, where you roll things out and then you keep things moving after that, in part because, especially now with digital marketing, we are always measuring and monitoring and seeing and sometimes adjusting. But typically at the start of a campaign, you do have a big rollout, and you're double checking, making sure that everything's where it needs to be. I think a lot of attention to detail, going back to that creative brief and asking ourselves some of those why questions. Did we are we orienting things the right way? Did we accomplish what we think we set out to accomplish in terms of back to that audience first approach? Are we just telling our story? Or are we thinking about what the audience needs here? We're checking ourselves against all of those things, and ultimately, sometimes we focus group test or user test even kind of late in the game to make sure that things are in good shape, and then you kind of hold your breath, and at a certain point you got to go, and then you see you're watching the numbers, you're seeing if things are working. You might introduce additional elements, but there is some risk involved, I would say, in when you go to market. You can try to check every box, but at the end of the day, it's the user experience that will determine whether or not you were ready, I guess, and if it's an effective campaign.
Yeah. I always know when a video is good to go when my wife watches the video and she says, "Let me watch that again."
Yeah.
That's like my litmus test,
Yeah.
Like, that's
No,
when I
it's
know things
great.
are good.
It's great. And I think some of that, particularly now, and I'm so passionate about storytelling, obviously, is do people want to share it? Do they, to your point, do they want to watch it again? And do they want to share it with others? And again, beauty of digital marketing, we can see a lot of that now in real time. And so that is when we start to get really excited about things, about what we've created together.
Yeah. I want to talk about critiquing campaigns and creative. Stereotypically, creative people are usually insecure and introverted,
Yeah.
which I think is such a really funny thing, because I think creative people also have to have the thickest skin,
Yeah.
and they
Yeah.
get critiqued the most. So it's this really kind of funny juxtaposition. I know me, like, I'm an insecure kid, and like when I show something, like, I just want everyone to love it. But a big element to a successful campaign is the critique process, is having everybody watch it, having eyeballs on it, the giving back on it, and making it better. Can you walk me through a critique process? How deep does a critique process go?
Yeah. Again, I think it depends. It depends on if this is something that's like a one and done, it's a quick post. And again, that might be seen by tens of thousands of people. You want there to be quality, but it's not going to be the end of the world if it's not perfect. So there's a lot that goes into kind of making sure that we're being appropriate with the amount of feedback we share. If there are people on my team that have seen something and are supportive of it, and even if I have my own, let's say, opinions about it, I do try to check myself and say, okay, they're on board with this. Let's go. Again, if it's not, let's say, a big national campaign, you do, I think, as a good creative leader, have to pick and choose your battles too about when you're going to dig in around something. If a campaign is really significant, if it's going to be, it's a flagship campaign, it's going to be seen by millions of people, the attention to detail there is really important. So you asked about the process and approach. It starts with the creative brief and your brand strategy. And so not even your brand guidelines, which tell you size of logo, font, colors. I'm talking about the brand strategy. So in our brand strategy, we have our voice. We have tenets around how we want to show up. And so we have to stay true to that. And so that means looking with an eye for brand and looking with an eye for what's in that creative brief to guide. And that's where I base my feedback, is really what is strategically consistent with expressing our brand or appropriate to the objectives of our campaign. I say to my team all the time, it's not about if I like it or if Rob likes it or if Joe likes it. It's not about it's about effectiveness. And of course, there's some degree of subjectivity in that. And you're right, some people are more sensitive to that than others. And you want to be kind in how you deliver feedback. It's part of the job, obviously, in terms of expressing our brand in consistent, compelling, and cohesive ways require having that kind of lens and eye when looking at creative.
My biggest struggle at 325, and I'm sure all my team members probably will relate to this, I am so passionate about like every video that we do. So I see every single thing. 99% of the stuff that goes out, like I have last looks, and if it's not perfect, like I'm talking just like a frame or just a shot or the framing of a shot, I get like sweaty. Like I cannot like let it go.
Yes.
And
yeah.
Will anybody notice? Will the client notice? Will the audience know? No.
Yeah.
But there is this deep like fire in me that could just not. And I've seen hundreds of thousands of videos, and I still just have that like itch to be like, no,
I feel you on
too
that.
much headroom or too little headroom. And I've at first like we'll do like Vimeo review, so they'll give me a link and I can just like easily leave comments. And it's probably still, I gotta get way better at this because my feedback is usually like, nope, yes, this sucks, fix this.
Yeah,
and that's probably not that
wow.
like good for my teammates. I hope that they know I'm kind of tongue in cheek with it. But I'm just moving so quick, like watching it in real time. Do you have any advice to me or to anyone when you're trying to give critique to a team member about creative? Because creative, it's such a touchy subject sometimes.
I actually start, and I think we talked about this a little bit earlier, with asking a question. It's often why. So it's what motivated creatively this decision, because really it's all about creative decision making. So because sometimes a colleague will see things differently than you do.
Yep.
And sometimes actually there is a why behind it. It might be a technical why, like you're right, we wanted to get more headroom. It just wasn't possible in that space, or the lighting was going to be off, or whatever the case may be. So it might be a technical why. It might be a brand why, like, well, here's how we were interpreting our brand expression and what we were trying to achieve here. There are a variety of different whys, and it might change your thinking about if it's the right creative decision or not. So I tend to often try to start with a question because your creative team member might have some really great insight there. Sometimes I think it's just acknowledging that, this might be a little bit of personal preference or opinion on something, and you as the person who's responsible are just going to own that. But this is the direction you're going in because of, again, strategically this or brand this, and or personal preference, or all of those things combined. And so it's sharing, I think you acknowledge this even in the question, it's sharing the rationale behind the decision in order to move people forward. It's a tricky thing because we really respect our colleagues and the people that we work with, and they are masters of their craft. And so, but these are complicated projects sometimes to pull off in the end. And the littlest things, the littlest creative decisions can have huge, huge impact. I'll tell you, my team just won an Emmy for a video that we produced. We'd been nominated before a number of times. And that was a video that we walked through frame by frame. We're really thoughtful about where does the music need to pick up, looked at so many different voiceover talents. What's the right voice? What's the right inflection? Those might seem like nitpicky things, but it's the difference between producing an Emmy award-winning video, and producing something that's good or might create feelings in people, but not just memorable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Michael Bay he did Transformers, and it was like a 3-hour long movie. And there's like, you know what? There's 24 frames in a second. What if we just get rid of one frame every scene? Just get rid of one frame, and you multiply that by, whatever, 3 hours,
Yeah.
and you can trim off like 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And they did that, just one frame, and they watched it, and it felt and looked completely different to them.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
one frame.
Yeah.
Right? Not even a second, a 24th of a second. And I always remember that. It always stuck out to me, 'cause I'm just like, man, every frame does matter. Like, if someone's talking, just letting them breathe just a little bit more
Yeah.
can make
Yeah.
the audience be like, oh, wow, I feel that. Or if you cut them off, it like almost, again, to me, it like hurts me whenever I see something that I don't think is correct. But I think a big part of this with everything is start with that why, and understanding that we are all here to make the best product.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
sometimes with critique, it almost feels like an attack to like their skills or their talent or their thought. But really, it's just like, let's just work together to
Totally.
move forward on
Yep.
it. And I think that's really tough for creatives, because most creatives made videos by themselves, only showed it, like that was a part of them.
Yeah.
And to break that into teamwork, I think is really, really tough for a lot of creatives.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I also, as you're speaking, I'm nodding about this idea that little things can have huge impact. Much earlier in my career, one of the places that I was really interested in was direct response marketing. So working for a nonprofit organization, we sent out tons of mail pieces. There's a whole science behind how to get people to respond in certain ways. And I remember working with just an incredible person who was leading our direct response team. And I came to her with an idea, and I said, based on audience, based on goals, I'd like to try to just shift the name of the person who's signing this letter. I think this name, who this person is going to be more effective at motivating this audience. She was great, said, yeah, let's test it. We tested it with a small part of our file, came back, larger average gift and larger percentage of people responding. Wow. So we roll it out to a larger pool of people. Same thing, validated the results. Within the year, we had rolled it out across the board to everyone. It netted over $1 million. One simple change. So it goes back to this idea of sometimes just teeny little things can have really enormous impact. It can be risky, though, to step out, or it can feel uncomfortable to take some of those steps. I'm a huge believer, though, in being willing to take some of those calculated risks, because the results can be really amazing.
Yeah, great. Last question I want to ask you for my 3 questions I ask everyone. Why should people consider doing more marketing or even getting into marketing? And maybe I'll give it even more specific. So there's a lot of either new companies or less than 10 team member companies that every minute matters to them, every dollar matters to them, but they want to grow. They're trying to scale. Why should they get into marketing? Some people are just anti-marketing. I kind of just want to give some that's like tangible, like why marketing is beneficial.
Yeah. Let's go back to where we started our conversation. What is marketing? One of the ways that I've described marketing before is that it's storytelling, and stories are powerful. Since the dawn of time, stories have been used and really leveraged to help shape people's thinking, how they feel, as we talked about, and ultimately how they act. And so most businesses are looking for action from a certain audience or audiences. And that can be hard to do. Stories, marketing, when done right and effectively by professionals who know how to do this stuff, can really bring to life an organization, their mission, can bring to life a product, a business, a reason to invest in ways that just sharing facts and figures don't. And so I'll give you an example. When I first started working at a children's hospital, one of my jobs was to tour celebrities and CEOs of companies, and I was given kind of a script of things I should share, and it was facts and figures. Important. We were doing amazing things. I started sharing stories, though, about the impact that we were having. And I could just see people light up, and I could see them get connected to what we were doing. There's something really human about storytelling, and it connects people, and that just transformed our ability to advance our goals. And so I really takes the what of what you're trying to communicate to the so what. So marketing, really essential, I think, particularly for certain businesses or organizations. Humanizing, making people think things that motivate them to act, helping people understand what you're about. So obviously I'm biased in this as a chief marketing officer, but really important when done well and right.
Yeah. I want to play devil's advocate to this a little bit, because I think that might also prove the point a little bit more as well. Do you think the audiences care about brands and companies? Like,
oh yeah,
I feel like a lot of companies might think no one even cares. Why would people even care about what I do? Like if I had a warehouse that made shoes, like why do people want to see the warehouse? Why do they care? So
yeah. There's actually a lot of data on this, and again, previous life, big part of my role was partnering with corporations to either, for corporate dollars, or to leverage their brand or their assets, like the ability to be in their stores or coffee houses or whatever the case may be, in order to communicate our brand. And one of the things that's really plays out in all of the literature, I mean, you can look and see individuals, especially right now, Americans, by and large, vast majority, want to support or put their dollars behind organizations that are doing some sort of social good, or that contribute in some ways that align with their values. And so it's important for organizations also to be able to tell their story often about how they're contributing to a better world. And so a lot of good data out there about this. I think it does matter.
Okay, so I have 3 questions that I ask everyone that comes on the show here. What is your favorite book or book that you would recommend to this audience?
Okay, so hard to pick one, but I would go with Brene Brown's Braving the Wilderness. So we just talked about humanness, and I think part of the beauty of that book is she talks about the human yearning to belong. And I read it at the height of the COVID pandemic, and when people were feeling, I think, really isolated and certainly lonely and looking for connectivity. And so at the same time, how do you find your people? How do you belong in different communities? And how do you not sacrifice yourself and who you are? I'm a brand practitioner. I think a lot about personal brand, and how do people show up in authentic ways. And so there's this real balance between wanting to belong and belonging, and not bending yourself into a pretzel and sacrificing who you are and not living your personal truth. So how do you do those two things? Brene Brown really talks about that in Braving the Wilderness. It's a great read.
So you've been doing marketing. It's always funny, marketing. There's so much to market. You've been in the marketing field for a long time with different organizations and different things in your career. What keeps you passionate? What keeps you motivated to keep doing this work?
Yeah, I reflect on this a lot because I've worked in different industries. I've told different types of stories across a whole range of different organizations. But there is a common thread across all of them, and that's this idea of unleashing potential in people and organizations. It's something that I am just really passionate about. So it motivates a lot of my activities. I work as a leader alongside some amazing women in Syracuse University's Women in Leadership program. So looking at these incredible professionals that we have throughout the university, and how do we provide them with learning and growing opportunities so they can unleash their potential and ultimately impact their different fields. It's why I love taking advantage of opportunities like this to share how to leverage storytelling and marketing and brand stewardship in order to unleash the potential of an organization, particularly mission-driven organizations. And just getting personal with you, I'd say as a mother of 3 children, I look at my kids who I think all have just incredible potential to contribute to this world. And so to me, how do you foster that? How do you grow that? That's something that gets me excited and keeps me passionate.
Okay, last question. What excites you most about Central New York today?
We're on the move. Do I have to pick one thing?
You can only pick one thing. That's why I find this question really exciting, because I feel like if I asked it 10 years ago, it'd be so much different. But I feel like today, like, a lot of people are really excited. So
you have the best of all worlds here. So I'm cheating a little bit because you did say one thing, but I would say you have city, but then you have nature. We're surrounded. So if I had to pick one thing, I would say just this environment that's Central New York. I live in a lakeside community. In the summer, I'm out on my kayak as much as I can be. It's just incredible. And then in the winter, I'm on the trail that's a mile from my house on snowshoes. So there's just amazing access to opportunity here. And it's just I've lived lots of places. Central New York is on the move, and it's a great place to be.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you. I love this topic, and really thank you so much for the conversation and for the opportunity to be here. Appreciate it.
If you want to learn more about Dara, you can follow her on LinkedIn at Dara Royer, and you can check out Dara's latest campaign with Syracuse University by going to syracuse.edu. And be sure to follow In the Studio with 325 with more conversations with extraordinary people every Monday.